Renee Norlock.
Hi, Renee. This is Tom. How are you?
Hi, Tom.
I've got you in the chamber live, so everyone's seated here. We haven't started yet, of course, but just wanted to make sure everything's working.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom.
Hi, Renee. How are you? It's Lori.
Hi, how are you today?
Good. We have you. If you have trouble hearing
Testing.
any of us, let me know. Because
Okay,
they have the phone set between me and the vice mayor.
Good morning,
okay.
Renee. Can you hear me?
Morning. I can't hear you. Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I want. I know Chris has some things for me and some other stuff. So.
Hey, that don't need to blow so hard on my face. That's blowing fast and hard.
We're talking about the air. Sorry.
No, and I put a reflector on that thing. I mean,
Well, she could hear us. I don't know about everybody else.
we're not gonna let you drop it. It's really spicy. I'm just kidding. We'll figure it out. Oh, for Joe tonight? I can barely even think about it. Heyo.
You're gonna glow like sunshine. Everything's fine. Okay.
I know where that one was going. Really not.
Excuse me.
Good. Right? That wakes me up. Turmeric.
We're not waiting for anybody else, right? Just us. Okay. It's really a turn. It's 9:45.
I can't give me a cup in it. I forgot to give him my cup. That was stupid.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is the Dania Beach City Commission workshop on city manager candidate selection. It is Monday, January 28, 2019 at 9:45 a.m. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Llewellyn,
Here.
Vice Mayor Odman,
Good morning. Here.
Commissioner Brandemart,
Here.
Commissioner Harris,
Here.
Commissioner James,
Here.
City Attorney Ansbro.
And I believe on the phone we have Renee Narlock, who is our recruiter for this position.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Um, So, Renee, do you have a process as to how you would like us to start this selection for candidates to interview?
Um, Mayor, I just kind of want to refresh everybody on where we are. Last I was there meeting with the commission, I gave you an update on the process and actually recommended candidates, 5 candidates, to the commission. And we agreed that we would take a little bit more time for review of the applications and regroup today to make a decision on those recommendations and anyone else that maybe in reviewing the applications the commission wanted to consider further. I do want to make mention that one of the candidates which was recommended, Mr. Horace McHugh, has accepted another position and has withdrawn from the process. And so that leaves the 4 remaining recommended candidates for consideration to move forward. And then again, anyone else that if you determine someone in the group you'd like to interview. We do have a date set aside for interviews, February the 13th, starting at 9:45 a.m., full day process. And if I've calculated correctly, we should wrap up around 4 p.m. And these are group interviews, meaning candidates will stand before you in a public meeting, before the full commission in a public meeting, and interview with you for approximately 1 hour each. And I think from there, I just need some direction from the commission this morning on which candidates you would like to bring forward to interview.
Renee, how many candidates do you want each of us to name?
There's no specific number. I just need a level of consensus among you about who you do put forward. So, I would certainly recommend talking with the remaining 4 candidates. But again, that's at your discretion whether the number of candidates we actually interview.
So, should one of the commissioners just start this out, or is there anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, why don't we do this like we normally do? Go in order, like we're calling the roll, and start with Commissioner Brandon Marty, then Commissioner Harris, Commissioner James, Vice Mayor Odman, and then myself.
Sounds good. Is that okay with everyone? All right. So Commissioner Brandon Marty, if you want to go ahead with your choice or choices, and we can have any commentary from there.
Why don't you?
I know how to do this. Karen Gardner Young is my choice.
Anybody else? Okay. Commissioner Harris, go ahead.
My choice would be Anna Garcia.
You can do as many as you'd like.
Have one if you wanted 5, 10, 15.
I'm gonna pass.
You can't.
Because, well, we're not voting. We're just saying who we're going to interview. I don't have any.
Yeah, but you have
You don't have anybody that you want to
present them.
interview?
I don't have anyone to add to the 2 names that were just called. So
Okay.
we're not voting. We're just choosing who we're going to
Yeah, but
interview.
say your names for the record.
I don't have any names to add. I don't have any names to add.
Renee, how does that go?
I don't have to add any names.
Renee,
I'm sorry, what is the question?
how does that go if a commissioner don't have any names?
Actually, what Commissioner James said is that she doesn't have anybody she'd like to add to the list. So she doesn't have to add anybody to the list if she doesn't want to, correct?
We could all
That's
say
correct.
that.
Yeah.
She's saying her person is already on the list of the 2 names that were mentioned. So I'll go ahead. I'm sorry. Was there more discussion? So my 2 names were Karen Gardner Young and Anna Garcia.
I'd like to add to the list Susan Grant. And just, Renee, for clarification, the situation with Alex Ray, he would not, if we were to interview him and like him, we would not be able to have him start for a period of time. Is that correct?
We would have to come to an agreement and look at possibilities of when he could actually start. He has a 30-day commitment in the month of July, and he actually retires March 31st. So we would and can start a new job under FRS. He's basically is retiring through FRS. He went into the drop program. So officially, he can be hired again at his choosing as early as August. And should you decide he is your city manager, we would have to look at how we could get him on board sooner than that, but also have to look at that 1 month gap of July. So there's a lot of things we would have to look at. I would say if you feel very strongly about him as a candidate, you know, he is certainly more than willing to come and sit down and interview with you and figure out if it looks like a right fit. And he's very flexible in regards to how he might be able to start and bridge the gap, if you will, between now and August. And some of the things he suggested, which I'm not suggesting at this time, I'm just suggesting if you feel strongly about him, there's no harm in bringing him to the table to interview. Some of the things he suggested is, you know, working in an interim capacity or under a contract or a consultant until such time that he can be an official employee of the city on August, whatever date that is. This is not unusual for people to do this that are in drop or trying to move on from drop. But we would have to really vet that out further if he turns out to be your top candidate.
My concern is that I hate to eliminate him for something like that because I do think he's very qualified and I would be very interested in speaking with him. I just don't, I don't want to delay this process further, and I do think we need to select somebody sooner rather than later.
Based on the number of candidates that I've heard suggested here, we do have a slot on the 13th that we could put him in that wouldn't, you know, create a problem for our scheduling on that date if you want to do that.
I'd like to add him. I'd like to hear what he has to say and see about his flexibility, and see if there is something that you know, if it does turn out that he is somebody that works with us.
Okay.
Personally, I feel like it's better to have more options than less. So why don't we add him?
Mayor, what I would suggest is even in the interview process, there would be a follow-up question for him relative to how, you know, should you be our candidate, how would you see this playing out over the next several weeks as far as options for you to come on board here. And that way, everybody can have a dialogue about that at that time.
Sure. Okay, so do we need to vote on these? No vote. Okay, so we don't need to vote on this.
I got my light.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Brandemari.
Renee,
Yes.
enlighten me on Susan Grant. Was she the one that was fired?
From Aventura, she was let go from Aventura after 6 months there.
Okay, she was not only fired, but isn't she also the one that brought notoriety to her city because of the fact that they didn't give her a position and they were an all-male commissioner? And they actually had a big article in the newspapers regarding Susan Grant?
Commissioner, I believe if I am thinking of the correct article, there was, and I think it was probably a blogger or maybe a local newspaper that
Miami Herald, I'm talking about.
wrote an article relative to Susan Grant and another deputy city manager. There were two deputy city managers in Coral Springs where she was, both female, neither of which got a nod for the position. And that particular article chose to write that, you know, in their opinion, that was they were overlooking female candidates intentionally there.
So it was a very controversial issue.
I fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, was the recruiter that did the city manager search there. And there were some very, very highly qualified candidates for that job. And it was very, very, very competitive.
One last question,
so-
okay, Renee? Was
that?
Susan Grant aware, or did she agree to that article that brought that notoriety to that city when she was fired? Was she aware
No,
of
I
that
don't,
article? Because I'll ask her that right here.
Are we talking about Coral Springs,
Yes,
Commissioner?
yes.
No, she was not. She was not. She was not participating in any sort of thing to to make the city look bad.
Did
No,
she
ma'am.
file a lawsuit against him for putting that story in there?
No, ma'am, not that I am aware of.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else they want to add? Commissioner James?
How many people do we have in total right now? Four? So, okay. That's all I want to know.
Renee, do you feel good about that number? Is that a good number for us for interviewing, the 4?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
All right.
Then let me ask this, does anybody have any objections to interviewing all 4? Or would you prefer to reduce it? Go ahead, Commissioner Harris, you look like you're wanting to say something.
Yes, I'll speak.
No, you
You want me to speak? Well, I don't. It's not that I have any objections. I just don't think that that last person that you put on, that I know that that already have different ties. I know that's someone that I probably wouldn't be on my top 2 or top 3 just because of the time and how long it's been. And it seems like it's going to be very cumbersome to try to work situations out with what they have going on. But other than that, I'm fine.
Commissioner Harris?
I agree with the commissioner.
Okay.
The time frame is just way off, and I don't think we should put this off any longer.
Sure, and like I said, my feeling is just I like to see what other options are out there, and see, we don't know specifically what the situation is, if there is something that he can be more flexible with, or if there's something that he can do, which was my main reason for including him, because he is qualified. So, anybody else have any? Go ahead.
Well,
Mayor, if I may,
Go ahead.
I checked prior to our phone call to see if we had any late applicants. We have a couple. I don't think any of them rise to the level of what we're looking at now, or that I would, in hindsight, change my recommendations. One of them did work for Dania Beach back in 2000 for a year as an assistant city manager and interim city manager, Mr. Jason Nunemaker. I don't know him. He went on to work for Lake Park for a couple of years. There's a 2-year gap on his resume, just looking at it, from 03 to 05, and then he's in Fellsmere, Florida, since then as city manager. Those are small communities, and again, unless there's some firsthand knowledge on the commission about this particular candidate and his qualifications, I have not done a preliminary. I do not know him. And at this time, based on just the information I have, would not change my recommendations.
You said that there was another late submission as well?
Yes, that was one that wouldn't even, to my opinion, meet minimum qualifications.
Okay. So do we have a consensus at this point that at least we would interview Karen Gardner-Young, Anna Garcia, and Susan Grant?
yes.
Yep.
Okay.
But I hope you got 4 votes for that one, because I don't like anybody that was fired from their city.
Okay. Okay.
I hope she doesn't have 4 votes.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. So let's plan for that then.
Did we take off? We did. So we did take off Alex.
Because clearly I heard
Okay.
that there was at least 2 people that were objecting to it, and I'm assuming that's what you were going to say before Renee spoke.
I was nothing of consequence. Renee answered it.
Okay.
All right. So Leah, we're moving ahead with those 3. Fantastic.
Okay. So do we need anything else?
Mayor,
Yes.
and I apologize, I don't have a visual. So so I understand that we have 3 candidates that are moving forward to interviews, and that would be in alphabetical order: Anna Garcia, Karen Gardner-Young, and Susan Grant.
Correct.
Okay. Mayor, I would like to know if there is anyone on the commission who would like to participate in one-on-one interviews, and if so, are we still working under the premise of our last conversation about that we would actually schedule these individually and at whatever scheduling works best for each commissioner that wants to participate.
Okay, well, I have several people who are chiming in here.
That was,
Commissioner Harris?
Yes to the first question, one-on-ones. And my next question would be, is there any way we could move this up before February 13th? Or what was the date? February 13th?
February 13th.
Is there any way anybody can move that up any sooner?
Yeah.
I can.
I'm available. I mean,
I believe Commissioner Branham already has a conflict next week.
But couldn't some of us start our one-on-ones? So
well, when is the date, the 13th? For the workshop.
Well, let me ask this first. Who up here would like to do one-on-ones? I know I would like to.
yes, I think everyone but Commissioner Brennan.
You mean go in a room and talk to them alone and ask them questions without the
Yes.
public hearing?
Yes.
No.
I'm not going to do that.
You're not?
No, I'm not.
I don't think it's
Okay.
nice.
Okay, so
there's
three of us would like to do
Put
one-on-ones.
people in that do that.
And that would be Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioner Harris.
Correct.
Thank you. And of the three that would like to do that, are you okay if we schedule those one-on-ones, not in blocks of time, but as your schedule permits, and just working around your schedule, and they would conclude prior to the group interviews on February 13th.
Yeah, I
Can I-
think all the
can I make a
commissioners are
suggestion?
eager to start those one-on-ones as soon as possible. Sorry.
Can
Okay.
I make a suggestion?
agree.
Because it's the three of you all, I think that you all could do a date that works for one day with the block schedule, because it's just three of you all and you don't have to worry about 5 people. I mean, I'm guessing because, the mayor has the least amount of flexibility within your schedule. You can kind of say what day works for you, and Commissioner's always available, and I'm sure that Vice Mayor will be able to push some stuff around instead of these candidates coming back and forth here so many times. I think if you can get together and do that on one day, I think that
Yeah.
would be great and better than, dragging them along through a process like that.
That's fine with me.
Start if you want to start naming your dates.
Yeah,
Mayor.
I'm taking a look right now
okay.
to see what I have.
Where are we? What day are we starting on? Oh, you're looking.
And obviously, the candidates have to be available as well.
Well, so maybe Renee, what if we give you
Like 3 dates?
like 2 or 3 dates, and you can then talk to our 3 candidates and see if which date is convenient for them, and then get back to us.
Okay.
All right, and we're gonna just start going through some dates here, starting with the mayor.
I'm available on February 5th, February 6th, and February 7th.
I am available on the 5th. Commissioner Harris, what's your 5th like? Okay, so let's put that down for one of our dates. That works.
Okay.
Oh, well, you know what? The 6th works as well. I have work that evening at 7, but I don't think I'll take that long. So Commissioner Harris, what's your 6th look? Great, 6. And then 7th, unfortunately, I can't do. Let's see.
Well, why don't we start with the 5th and 6th and see
All
if
right.
we can work it from there.
How's that sound, Renee? So right now we have
That
two
sounds-
dates.
That sounds great. So on the 5th or the 6th, at any time during the day, all 3 of you are available, correct?
For those 2 dates, 9:45, because I have Milo.
I was actually going to
Okay.
suggest if there is, I prefer afternoons, but if it needs to be in the morning, I'll work something out.
Okay. That sounds great. I will confirm that just as soon as possible.
And if we're going in blocks, I mean,
And-
we could, it wouldn't matter anyway. So.
Okay. And as I understand it, we are shooting for trying to find a block, doing a block of time for this and doing it at City Hall.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. That's great.
I mean, if we can't do it in blocks, if it ends up, people are available on different dates, that I'm sure we can work something out with that as well.
Right.
Okay. So what I believe we're looking at on the 13th, we start at 9:45. I need about 15 minutes just to, we start at 9:30 on the
9:45.
13th.
The
15,
Vice Mayor needs 9:45.
9:45? Okay. All right. We'll do about 10-minute debrief just to go over kind of the rules of the day. And then we'll probably have 2 candidates before lunch, 1 candidate after lunch, and then we will debrief at the end of the day to talk about candidates and come up with a consensus on our next steps moving forward.
Okay.
Question.
Yes, Commissioner James.
If on the 13th, after we've done all of that and debrief, if we came to a consensus then on a candidate, could we vote then, or do we have to come back just to do a vote?
Tom?
It wouldn't be a regular meeting, so you can't vote unless it's a regular meeting.
Well, I mean, like,
Secondly, it should be a public
if we
hearing.
select someone to take to the regular meeting, is what I'm saying. If we come to a consensus.
You could do that.
Right.
If, however, you propose a contract, which is more than likely, you're going to need to provide a public hearing with notice in the newspaper at least 5 days before a hearing.
Okay, let me rephrase that then. If on the 13th we come back and we have at least 4 people agree on one person, can we move to the next steps for the next commission meeting to be the meeting that we officially vote with the contract and everything else on that candidate?
If there's 5 days to put it in the paper.
Okay.
It's 26th? Next commission meeting? So yes.
Yeah, there would be time, yes. If we came to a consensus on the 13th, when we have the final interviews, then we could make a recommendation. They could put it in the paper, it would go in for 5 days, and then at the next meeting, which would be the 26th, we could actually vote on it.
Why does it have to be a public hearing rather than just a
The charter.
workshop? Okay.
The charter. And again, the matter of negotiating a contract depends on the city and the candidate, so.
Could we ask for a copy of the rough draft of the contract now, or?
I can give you something that we used last time for the last manager.
Okay,
Happy to do that.
okay, in case we want to update anything because of the
Sure.
technology involved and
Sure.
things like that.
Mayor, to the extent that it'll move us along, I will ask candidates to provide me, should they be the selected candidate, in anticipation of that, I will ask candidates to provide me what they would like to see in a contract, so I can already begin to formulate some thoughts on what that might look like, again, to expedite things when we get to that point.
Renee, you would already have their salary ranges and all of that also at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And I do believe last time around, that was an add-on question in our interview process. There was a commissioner who asked each candidate as an add-on question, where do you need to be salary-wise? What would you be looking for in order to consider this opportunity?
Okay. Does anyone have anything further?
Yes, sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner James.
Can we get a copy of the questions beforehand so we could see if we wanted to add on any questions? Because some of the questions that were on there last time, I know that we as a commission, a lot of us had different questions that we wanted to ask that weren't necessarily on there. So if we can get a copy of that, and maybe we can go back and forth with you, Renee, so that we can come up
Sure.
with a set of questions so everyone and their thoughts will feel inclusive, and it won't feel like you're asking one candidate these set of questions and not the other candidate these sets of questions.
Okay.
I guess you could email that out to us, and then we'll notify you if we have any changes or any suggestions.
Yeah, each person can
Okay.
send it back to you, Renee, and then you can come up with a final set of questions that goes out to all of us.
That's not a final step. We still have a right to add that.
No. You have no. I'm saying like the final what to go by, set of questions instead of just
Because
her bringing
hers
in her
are
questions and then we might
set.
have
I
right.
understand what you're saying.
individual one-on-ones, I don't know who's this really directed to. Where are we going to each hold them? Like, where do you want the three of us to go?
I'm
Right,
assuming we need a conference room somewhere.
Conference room, that conference room there.
Yeah.
And then the one right here. Okay, all right. And we'll just straighten out who goes where, I guess, when we decide on the date.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Is there a set of questions we have to ask? No, it's a free-for-all. I think you can ask.
Well, within within boundaries. I mean, there's certain things legally you're not allowed to ask. But
well, I figure that was given, but right.
Yeah.
Anything else? Yeah, you can ask. And
Renee, could you please provide everyone with what they cannot ask legally? Because I don't want anyone to,
sure.
because I'm not, if there might be things that we don't even know that we're not supposed to ask, that we might think that wasn't a big deal, you know?
Did you hear her, Renee? Commissioner
I
James?
did not.
Okay, Commissioner James was just asking that you send to the three commissioners
Who are doing
that are
one-on-ones.
having the one-on-ones to please send them what they legally cannot ask.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
I would be glad to do that.
Well, here's another suggestion as well. If we wanted to have our city attorney sit in on those one-on-ones, we can do that, correct? Just to ensure that there's nothing improper being asked.
Yes, you can do that. I will make sure when I send you the questions for the group interviews that I include what you should stay away from, and that anything that I say about the group interviews pertains to the one-on-ones also. You cannot talk about things like age and race and ethnicity and color, and it's a long list of things, but basically just staying away from personal information. And I know that's hard sometimes because you're hiring a person and you want to know something about them, but that's really for the candidate to opt to share information with you in the interview process. And they typically will do that. They understand you're hiring a person and you want to know a little bit about who they are as individuals. But you just cannot ask those questions.
Right, of course. Commissioner Brandemarty.
Yeah. Renee, will we know what questions were asked by the other commissioners?
Not in the one-on-ones, because the one-on-ones is a much less structured environment. It's really more for conversation and interaction, and to tell you the truth, it's as much for the candidates as it is for the commissioners, because the candidates want to get a good feel for each of you individually, and by learning about you individually and connecting with you individually, they get a better grasp on what the whole commission is like as a group. It's kind of learn the pieces to learn the whole part of what the commission is like. So it's not scripted. It's not now some of the commissioners may have scripted questions. That's entirely up to them. I will say that sometimes in a group interview, or especially in our debriefing session, a commissioner may offer some information and say, let's say someone says, well, I'm not real sure why they did this or didn't do this. And a commissioner may then say, well, I asked them that in my one-on-ones, and here's what they told me. So some information may be conveyed if it's needed, if it's, to address a question or something like that. But in the one-on-ones, that's really just a dialogue between you as a commissioner and the candidate.
Does that become a public record or not?
The communication itself does not become a public record. Any notes taken or anything written does become a public record.
So in other words, if they go in there with the one-on-one and they've got a list of questions, that becomes public record, correct?
The questions
That's
can
all.
become public
yeah,
record.
that's what
yes.
I wanted to know. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else? Okay, so I think we have a schedule set. And I think that's all we need to do today. Yes?
Thank you,
Hi.
Mayor Llewellyn. Thank you,
Thank
Vice
you.
Mayor and Commissioners.
We're adjourned.
Oh, I want to know what they asked. you're saying, but I gotta know. I gotta know, make sure that. I think I will. I think I will. If I vote with you, will you this? That's why I don't do that. Yeah, I know you do. I'm gonna use it when election time comes, though. I'm gonna use it when election time comes and